Welcome to the Honest to Godcast, podcast dedicated to learning the truth, and the truth will set you free. I'm your host, Stephen B. Hello, welcome to the Honest to Godcast. I'm your host, Stephen B., and appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I see that we picked up a couple of new subscribers last month. Appreciate you guys being here too. This is not the kind of uh, podcast where I put it out there and get 1,000 views in less than 30 minutes. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but I really like the small beginnings, and I want it to grow organically, because a lot of these people on these channels, Rumble and YouTube and whatnot, they actually pay money, to get subscribers and followers, and I'm not going to do that. But let's get right to it. Today's topic is we're going to call it To Boldly Go. Before we get into the meat of the matter, I want to talk about two things. One is technology, and because of Moore's Law, we know that technology doubles every 18 months. So whatever you think or I think is state of the art, they're at least 250 years in advance for those that are in the know. And so bear that in mind as we get into this topic, because the other thing I wanted to mention is channeling. Now, I do come from a one God apostolic, tongue talking, holy rolling, born again, heaven bound, believing in the liberating power of Jesus' name church, from back in the 70s. I'm not that way now, but just to let you know that that's my background. I used to think that channeling was just a bunch of hokey nonsense and that it was just people who were insane, or people that are, just trying to make a name for themselves. And, it's easy to spot the fakes. Number one, a couple of things to look for is when these people go to channel, do they all of a sudden have a fake British accent? That should be suspect right there. Or the other method that they use is, well, I'm going to channel the Pleiadians, and they start talking like robots, and they give you a bunch of quantum limbo, mumbo jumbo, psychobabble that has no practical application. That's another thing to look for. However, I did have to change my mind about channeling. I did a deep dive into it, and I looked at the ancient scriptures. In fact, in the book of Job, which is one of the oldest written texts, it was even before Genesis because it was before Abraham. Abraham was from Ur, and all of those creation stories of the Sumerians, Babylonians, and etc. Abraham would have known those stories and passed it on. They credit Moses for writing the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. And that may or may not mean that Moses himself sat down as a scribe and wrote it out. I mean, he did have that council of 70. Remember his father-in-law was Jethro, the high priest of Midian, and so he had 70 guys that were, probably helping this. And of course, it had been retranslated later, and they took the Elohim stories, pasted it Yahweh over it, and tried to make it a seamless narrative, and it's not. But anyway, um, the book of Job talks about channeling. Other ancient texts talk about channeling. And I did a dive into that, and I found out that the Germans were being aided by a channeler named Maria Orsic, who um, gave them uh, blueprints and channeled information for the Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapons. So I see validity in it now. Not all of them, like I said, there are a lot of them that are just peanuts up here, and so the reason I'm bringing this up is because I recently had a series of synchronicities that were just blowing my mind. I started getting emails one after another. I had 22 emails in a period of 10 days that all had to do with, believe it or not, Gene Roddenberry. And I used to think, for all these decades, I thought Gene Roddenberry, the only thing I knew about him is he was an LA cop and that, he was the creating driving force behind the Star Trek franchise. And so that's all I knew about him. Um, I did a deep dive into the secret space program. There are some 980 whistleblowers, if you will, that were involved in these black ops programs who are coming out now. And Dr. Stephen Greer has on his staff at least that many people, and there are other people out there too. People like Corey Good, who was off planet. I know that we've had this anti gravity propulsion system since 1954 that's been perfected. And a lot of these UFOs, that people are seeing are reverse back engineered technologies. I believe they call them alien reproduction vehicles. Having said that, come to your own conclusion on that. Um, but I wanted to bring that up because all of a sudden it was Gene Roddenberry, Gene Roddenberry, Gene Roddenberry, and I would even go outside. I live in a very small town, and I would go, to the market or whatever, and people would be talking about Gene Roddenberry. Combine that with the 22 emails I had to do a deep dive. I found out that Gene Roddenberry in 1963 through 1964 spent a whole year with a group of people that were channeling information. And either he was being channeled to by them or it was him directly. So when I did my dive into these whistleblowers, people like William Tompkins, Laura Eisenhower, the granddaughter of Dwight Eisenhower, who was recruited to go off world in 2006. Um, I would listen to these stories and I thought, wow, these sound really familiar. Where is this coming from? And then I realized that it was Star Trek. And I didn't know if it was a case of art imitating life or life imitating art, but either way, it was a conundrum that I had to, uh, come to terms with. And so, as far as Gene Roddenberry is concerned, I'm going to show you a couple of examples here, uh, and there are many. There are many when you compare these stories that people like Corey Good is saying. These whistleblowers, these guys that were and these were not plebeians running around like crazy people or whatever. These were, people that were in the government and worked for Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, et cetera, et cetera. And they're fascinating stories. But take a look at this. This is from a Star Trek episode from the original series, third season, 13th episode, and this is the Dolmen of Elas. And take a look at this woman. First of all, notice her hair. This is exactly the hairstyle that you will see if you look up the ancient Babylonian, Akkadian, Sumerian um, hieroglyphics. It's this style of hair. And notice that there's that thing coming down on her forehead. That's to cover a mark. And so, uh, it was a great story. But I have found out through my research that science fiction is no longer science fiction, it's science fact. Okay, so the story goes that there was an Apollo mission that was a joint Russian American one, that they had gone to the moon. And there was an ancient, a pre flood uh, craft there that they examined, and they found, they call her the Mona Lisa, but this is her. And so take a look at this. It's the same person, same hair, same everything. Now, I know that there are some videos that are out there that debunk that whole story. In fact, there was a guy who was a filmmaker who claimed to have um, fabricated that whole thing. And he even had a like a real flimsy rubber, like like a Halloween mask of this woman. Um, there are a few videos out there, and so there are people that say that that's been debunked. Um, and whether it has been or not remains to be seen. I know that in whatever field you're researching at the time, whether it's, Bigfoot or UFOs or this or that, there's always going to be your debunkers, you know, and they're going to try and tell you, weather balloons, and they're going to try to tell you, that this stuff didn't happen. And that's their job. They're debunkers. But I also know that you can usually take the same evidence and put it on the table and debunk the debunkers. So I don't know if this story about the Apollo 20, with these Russian and American astronauts thing is true. And it really doesn't matter. But why the connection with Gene Roddenberry? Why the Star Trek connection? Why was this episode with the Dolman of Elas? And why does this Apollo 20 narrative, why do they dovetail? And this is not the only one. There are many, many episodes, and up until, like I said, for decades, I just thought that Roddenberry was an excellent sci-fi writer. That he was, in the 70s and 80s, like Roger Zelazny was in, the 50s and 60s. Up along the level of Harlan Ellison, some of those authors. Um, but when you factor in the channeling aspect of it and the group that he was with, and don't quote me on this, I'm going to have to do more research, but it may be the same group that channeled the Law of One material. So anyway, this has been a really weird about a month for me. I've gone down every rabbit hole that I can imagine, trying to connect the dots and get this all in some comprehensible fashion and give it out to you. And so yeah, keep watching the sky. um, this was meant to happen as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. And we know through the book of Enoch, that there were these watchers, they called them, Anunnaki in the Sumerian text, this group of people that came here. And this is another thing about Roddenberry. Uh, the Bible talks about, it calls it the determinate council. And a lot of people say, well, that was the council in Jerusalem. But no, those same scriptures talk about it in the context of foreknowledge and predestination. And, in the Star Trek franchise, you have Seven of Nine, the Council of Nine, and this all fits with the book of Job as well. There was a day where it uses B'nai Elohim, sons of God, came to present themselves, and Satan came among them. So you know, you have to uh, look at this from an informed perspective. Um, for example, uh, the Bhagavad Gita, another ancient text, talks about these Vimana, these flying craft. Actually, they're parked all over India. People don't really know what they are. They think they're like temples and whatnot, but they were able to go through a mountain. They were able to move through dimensions. They had a weapon that was, as they said, it was as bright as 10,000 stars. And it describes elephants screaming and dying and leaving their shadow on the ground. And there's area in India where the radiation is so, um, you know, uh, what we know an atomic weapon looks and sounds and acts like, we know all of this now. And so, yeah, I'll leave you with this thought. Um, Science fiction is no longer science fiction, it's science fact. And I know this is probably the most far out video that I've done so far, but I mean, I talk about OO parts, and in the one about the crystal skulls, I showed evidence that the crystal skulls were exoskeletons for higher density light beings, and stuff like that. So if you want to label me as crazy, I'm fine with that. I there were a lot of people, man, back in the 80s that our government killed for putting books out that talked about all these things, and we're seeing it come to fruition now. And so we can't just automatically vilify people and call them crazy because they say they were channeling information. And so anyway, that's basically what I wanted to put out there. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully we'll be back with you very, very soon. And I will do that timeline that I promised Mike Guyver, one of our subscribers. I was in the process of working on that, and I got derailed by this whole Gene Roddenberry stuff. So anyway, that's it. Y'all take care, be well, be blessed, and know that you are appreciated. Thank you for your time.